24 Navy SEALs were pinned to the earth, out of ammo and options, when the radio confirmed everything. You're on your own. They braced for the end. Then, a single shot cracked across the mountains. Not from one of their own, but from a 65-year-old consultant they'd all dismissed as a useless relic. Before I tell you how that one shot changed everything, make sure you hit that subscribe button and drop a comment telling us where you're watching from. Now, let's get into it. The mountains of this godforsaken country were unforgiving, all jagged peaks and shadowed valleys that swallowed sound and hope. In those shadows, the remnants of Viper Team huddled behind shattered rock, the air vibrating with the relentless chatter of enemy machine guns. Muzzle flashes blinked like angry wasps from the ridges above, each one a promise of death. They were outnumbered, outmaneuvered, and bleeding out. The comms officer's voice had been hollow when he relayed the final message from command. Negative on air support. Weather too severe. You're on your own until dawn. Dawn was a lifetime away. Every man there did the grim math in his head. It always ended the same way. Annihilation. Staff Sergeant Martinez, his face a mask of grit and despair, spat blood. We hold. He rasped into the comms, but his eyes told a different story. There was no holding this position. Not against this many. Tucked away near the comms gear, separate from the tightly knit operators, sat Jedediah Jed Vance. 65 years old, with a mane of silver hair and a face carved with the kind of wrinkles that tell stories of forgotten wars. He wore a faded, old-style camouflage uniform that looked ancient next to the SEALs' high-tech gear. Jed was a terrain consultant, a ghost from the Vietnam era brought out of retirement, because he knew these mountains better than any map. To the young, formidable SEALs, he was just the relic. An old man who moved too slow, who spoke of wind patterns and animal trails instead of satellite imagery and drone support. They'd smirked when he cleaned his archaic-looking Barrett rifle, a relic itself. Maybe you should stick to maps, old-timer, a young lieutenant had said. This is a new kind of fight. Jed had just nodded, the words bouncing off a lifetime of similar dismissals. He wasn't here to earn their respect. He was here because he'd seen this exact scene play out 40 years ago in a different jungle with different young men. Too many of them never came home. He carried the memory of his old spotter, a kid named Danny, who died in his arms whispering about the girl back home. Danny's last lesson echoed in Jed's mind now, as it always did in the quiet moments before the storm. One shot, Jed. The one that defines everything. Make it true. Now, listening to the desperate chatter on the radio, Jed's gaze drifted to the eastern ridge. During the mission briefing, he had pleaded with them to secure it. It was steep, exposed, impossible, they said. But Jed knew that from that ridge, the entire valley became a chessboard. From there, one rifle could do what an army couldn't. He heard Martinez give the order for a final defensive perimeter. The end was coming, but they were wrong. There was one last option, one they had laughed out of the room. A quiet fury, cold and sharp, solidified in Jed's chest. He could stay here and watch these kids die, just like Danny. Or he could climb. He could risk his own life for the slimmest chance of saving theirs. He closed his eyes. The choice was never really a choice at all. He leaned into his personal calm, his voice a low, gravelly tone. Consultant maintaining position, he reported. It was a lie. In the growing darkness, unnoticed by the frantic soldiers, the old man slung the heavy Barrett over his shoulder, grabbed a pouch of magazines, and began to move toward the impossible ridge. The stone was like a wall of knives, tearing at his worn gloves and old knees as he began the ascent. Below him, the symphony of battle grew more desperate, but Jed tuned it out, focusing only on the rock, the wind, and the voice of a ghost from long ago. The climb was a brutal testament to time's cruelty. Jed's lungs burned with the thin, cold air, and his joints, worn down by decades of service, screamed in protest. The weight of the Barrett felt like an anchor dragging him back to the valley floor. But where his body faltered, his mind, honed by a lifetime of survival, took over. He didn't fight the mountain. He flowed with it, using shadows for cover and ancient animal trails for footholds that the younger, stronger men had never seen. He moved with a slow, deliberate rhythm that defied the frantic urgency of the battle below. Halfway up, a volley of RPGs shook the canyon, and he pressed himself flat against a rock face, watching a fireball engulf a piece of machinery where seals had taken cover. He saw them scatter, dragging a wounded brother. Time was running out. "Make it true, Danny," he whispered into the roaring wind, his own breath trembling but fierce. With bloodied fingers, he pulled himself higher into the darkness. When Jed finally crested the ridge, he didn't stop to rest. He crawled on his belly to a pre-selected outcrop of rock he'd identified on the map hours ago, a perfect sniper's nest invisible from below. He settled the Barrett onto its bipod, his movements economical and sure. He pressed his cheek to the cold stock, and as he looked through the high-powered scope, the chaotic valley snapped into sharp, silent focus. The battlefield was laid out before him, a tableau of fire and death. His breathing slowed, his pulse steadied. Inhale, exhale, squeeze. The Barrett roared, a crack of thunder that seemed to split the sky. Miles below, the heavy machine gunner who had been tearing Bravo team to pieces collapsed, his weapon silenced. For 3 seconds, an eternity in a firefight, the valley fell eerily quiet. The SEALs froze, looking for the source of the impossible shot. The enemy fighters hesitated, a ripple of confusion spreading through their ranks. Then the second shot rang out. An RPG carrier spun around, his warhead detonating uselessly against a rock wall. A third shot, and a spotter directing fire from a high perch tumbled into the abyss. The impenetrable net that had trapped America's finest operators was being unraveled, thread by thread. Martinez, his face caked in dust and blood, lifted his head in disbelief. "Who the hell is that?" he yelled. His question was answered by another enemy soldier dropping silently to the ground. Then a voice, calm and raspy with age, crackled over the command channel. A voice no one expected to hear. "Guardian Overwatch to Viper 7. Move northeast toward the compound. I'll clear your path." It was Jed, the relic, the man who was supposed to be babysitting the maps. Martinez felt a jolt of disbelief so strong it was almost painful. He's on the ridge. The suicide climb. It wasn't possible. Yet, as another enemy fighter fell, he knew it was the only explanation. A strange, unfamiliar feeling began to spread through the pinned-down men. Hope. They began to move, cautiously at first, then with growing confidence, under the protective fire of the ghost they couldn't see. Jed never fired twice from the same spot. He crawled between positions, a gray shadow against gray rock, making it seem like a whole team of snipers was hunting from the ridge. The enemy commander, enraged and confused, screamed orders, tried to rally his men for a final, overwhelming push. But panic was a disease, and Jed's rifle was the vector. For the first time all night, the SEALs weren't the hunted. They were the hunters. The enemy commander was no fool. He quickly realized the Phantom Sniper was the linchpin of the American defense. He pulled his men back into tighter formations, using infrared scopes to scan the dark ridge, and began shouting new orders. Jed watched through his optics, his mind working like a cold calculator. He saw the commander step into a clearing, rallying his troops, a perfect target. Jed centered the crosshairs on his chest, his finger taking up the slack on the trigger. But before he could fire, the night hissed past his ear. A bullet from a counter-sniper slammed into the rock inches from his face, spraying his cheek with stone fragments. Jed didn't flinch. He rolled, instinct born of 100 such encounters taking over. He dragged the Barrett behind a larger boulder, his heart hammering against his ribs. They'd found him. Another round sparked off the rock beside him. The enemy sniper was good, equipped with modern optics and a high-velocity rifle. A younger man might have tried to match him shot for shot, a duel of reflexes. Jed knew better. This wasn't a battle of speed, it was a battle of wits. This ridge was his territory. He lay perfectly still, controlling his breathing, becoming just another part of the mountain. He didn't look for a muzzle flash. He looked for what was wrong. A shadow that was too deep. A patch of scree that seemed unnaturally disturbed. He listened to the wind, feeling how it carried sound across the canyon. Then he saw it, not a glint of a scope, but the faint, fleeting flutter of a piece of camouflage netting disturbed by a gust of wind, a mistake a modern sniper, relying on technology, might make. It was just for a second, but it was enough. The man who had almost ended his life was lining up his next shot. Jed swung his rifle into position, a fluid motion honed over 40 years. He didn't aim for the glint. He aimed for the man behind it. Exhale. Squeeze. The Barrett roared once more. Through the scope, Jed saw the enemy sniper's position erupt in a plume of dust. The duel was over. Down in the valley, the SEALs felt the pressure from the enemy Overwatch vanish. Martinez let out a ragged breath. Whoever was up there, he was one of them now. Advance, he roared. But the commander was still alive. He had used the duel as a distraction, maneuvering his squads to flank the advancing Americans. Jed saw the trap unfolding. He could take out the commander now, a risky shot, or he could save Martinez's flank. The decision was instant. He let the commander live, for now, and turned his rifle on the flanking squad. 2 shots cracked in quick succession. 2 threats vanished. The SEALs advanced another 50 meters, oblivious to the disaster they had just averted. But Jed's pouches were feeling lighter. He counted his remaining rounds under his breath. 20 left. 19. The survival of 24 elite soldiers now rested on a handful of bullets and one old man who refused to let history repeat itself. As the SEALs pushed deeper into the compound, the enemy's desperation boiled over into raw ferocity. A new wave of fighters poured from a northern pass, a torrent of bodies and weapons meant to overwhelm the Americans through sheer numbers. Jed rolled onto his side, his muscles screaming from the climb and the constant recoil, and fed a fresh magazine into the Barrett. He forced the pain from his mind, his focus narrowing to a single, sharp point. He had to break their charge, not just stop it. The next few minutes became a blur of thunder and smoke. His shots weren't random. They were a form of brutal battlefield calculus. He didn't target the men in front. He targeted the leaders, the non-commissioned officers driving the assault. He shot the man carrying the radio, severing their communication. He shot the squad leader, and the men behind him faltered. Below, the SEALs, emboldened by this divine intervention, met the charge head-on, their fire disciplined and deadly. Jed's rifle broke the assault's spine from above, and the SEALs tore it to pieces from below. The northern pass became a graveyard, the survivors scrambling back into the shadows. Martinez wiped sweat and grit from his face. He's buying us every second we need, he breathed into his comms. Move! Push! They stormed the compound's central building, but the enemy commander was still out there, a phantom holding his remaining forces together through sheer will. Jed scanned the chaos, his scope of hawk's eye searching for its prey. Then he saw him, on an opposing ridge, directing his last squads for a coordinated counterattack. The shot that could end it all. Jed steadied his breathing, the crosshairs locking onto the commander's chest. He adjusted for wind, for distance, his finger tightening. Crack! A second counter-sniper. So close he felt the heat of the round whip past his cheek. The commander had a dedicated guard. Jed dove for cover as another round chewed up the rock where his head had been. He gritted his teeth, crawling, shifting angles. He spotted the new sniper's hide, a faint glint deep in shadow. No time for a protracted duel. Jed swung the rifle, exhaled, and squeezed. The glint vanished, but the delay had cost him. The commander was gone, shielded again. Jed cursed, reaching into his pouch. One final magazine. 10 rounds. That was all that stood between the SEALs and destruction. Below, Martinez's voice was raw. We break them here, or we die here. The final, desperate clash began. Jed knew holding them off wasn't enough. He had to break their will. And that meant one shot, the right shot. Through his scope, movement flickered. The commander. He was exposed for a single heartbeat, shouting at his men. Jed's world shrank to the circle of his scope. His breath held. The fate of everyone in the valley balanced on his trigger finger. He exhaled slowly, and the Barrett thundered one last time. He saw the commander collapse. The effect was instantaneous. The enemy fighters, their leader gone, simply broke. They dropped their weapons and ran. For the first time all night, the enemy was in full retreat. At dawn, a profound silence fell over the valley. 24 men who should have been ghosts stood alive, their eyes fixed on the ridge where a lone, silver-haired figure began his slow descent. This was more than just a battle won. It was a powerful statement about what truly matters when everything is on the line. It wasn't about the latest gear or the strength of youth, but about the timeless value of experience. Wisdom forged in fire, paid for in scars, and wielded with deadly precision when it counted most. Have you ever underestimated someone based on their age, only to be proven wrong? What would you have thought if you were one of those seals watching that old man begin his impossible climb? Do you think that in moments of ultimate crisis, true strength comes from the wisdom of experience or the power of modern innovation? We believe courage has no expiration date. If this story about forgotten valor and timeless skill resonated with you, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories about the heroes you've never heard of. Share this with someone who believes that old soldiers never die. We read every comment, so let us know your thoughts. More stories about unlikely heroes and impossible odds are waiting for you on the screen right now. Watch those next, and we'll see you tomorrow with another story of incredible courage.